that is available can be made available to the public, and we'll be able to actually publish that. And that's coming down the road next year, but at least in terms of under the hood, we're putting in place the technology to make it possible. And then that technology will also link the different enterprise solutions that we're putting in place, like the medical examiner, like property, like revenue, and we'll be able, and ERP, and we'll be able to quite easily take things that we're building and repurpose them so that we can create dynamic links and share data, open data in our environment and with you guys and the wonderful things you're doing.
I want to just add something here. So I'm stating the obvious, but we have some headwinds to mine this data. I mean, it's not readily available when it's sitting on legacy applications like that. So that's a point that hopefully is not escaped on you, and we need the cooperation of obviously of our partners and our teams to move forward to get to more modern technologies to expose these data better. The ESP RFP is coming out on September 23rd. So this is a great opportunity for our criminal justice system. And it's a great opportunity to really make a conscientious effort, and we're working on 32 exchanges, data exchanges between different systems, from the state's attorney system to the clerk's system, the clerk of the circuit court systems. Those would be the first ones with the sheriff system. The memorandum of agreement was just signed by all the stakeholders on August 28th. So the momentum is there. We're working on the right things, and it's gonna take, of course, a lot of effort to get this. But I wanted to make sure that when you ask questions around open data, say, why is it there not yet? Well, part of it is because we are focusing also on migrating those systems, moving them, and looking at the workflows and the business processes. So we can probably get to all of this, and I'm sure there'll be a question: where is the criminal justice information going to be there? And can you link it to this and this? And yeah, it's in the cards, but it's not like I have a magic wand to get it there tomorrow, even though I would love to.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on what Simone is saying, aside from our daytime jobs, right, this is important, and as requests come in, if it's on a mainframe, I literally have to tap one of my programmers, take a look at it, spec it out, go to COBOL, write code, write JCL, configure it, run a job, put it on the schedule. It's just very involved. So we recognize that, we understand that, and as Simona alluded to, we're taking steps, we have plans in place, and we're taking steps to modernize these applications so that in the very near future, could be next year, could be the following, depending on the initiative, we'll be able to be more agile, nimble, and respond to requests. So,
what is ERP?
It's an enterprise resource plan. It's basically our payroll and HR and financial systems. So we recently migrated from a very long term, I want to say roughly 15-year-old HR payroll system to a more modern platform. And we'll soon be releasing an RFP for the system implementation of the complete overhaul for financials as well. So that's coming next year sometime. So I wanted to highlight a program, and then we'll also highlight an application that Cook County built. But this is a program that actually leveraged our GIS parcel and address point data. So this is an example of a success that was partly successful because we actually contributed with data. And it's large lots. The URL's there, and the city of Chicago worked with some good folks in Inglewood to take a look at all the vacant residential land in Inglewood, and actually the city agreed to place these lots for $1. And it's been very successful. Lots of lots have been purchased. They're looking to expand this program in East Garfield Park. And again, this was the application that was created and was actually leveraged. They leveraged our data. So that's just one example of many of real data being used in the real world and real life to make a difference, and we're very proud of that. And as you can see below, this was initiated by Damon Drummer at Teamwork Inglewood and built by DataMate. So I just want to give credit where credit is due, but we're very happy about that. This is an application that Cook County, with real technology, particularly the GIS team, they built in response to requests for information on TIFs. So the URL is at the top. A brief description is, the Cook County Treasurer decided to expand the tax bill in terms of putting more and more information on it, so that everyone understands, where funding is going, TIF dollars, in terms of pension, how they're being funded, and if there's enough money out in the pension to actually fund it, things of that nature. It's really very useful information, and so we got a request to find out more about TIFs and your particular neighborhoods, where the money is, and as well as how much is available or being spent. So the GIS team worked with the county clerk, David Orr's office, to provide a public application that assists with transparency. And you can actually go here and you can actually export data and download it, and then go take it and use it for other purposes. So this information is published. It's out there now. It's live. We built it in-house. It illustrates 435 TIF districts with revenues, as well as the 1.8 million county parcels. So I can sit here and talk about it all day, but go out, visit it, take a look if it interests you. But it's something that we support in-house, and we'll continue to update as time goes on. So again, this is just more information. You can search by municipality, by ward, by address. It shows you the related TIF revenue information, aerial photography. You can draw graphics. You can make measurements. It's more than just a TIF tool. It actually folds in property layers. It's really a good tool. And as Simona said, we like to come here and give these types of things plugs, because you don't always hear about them. But this is an example of an application, and really it's essential to what we're doing in terms of open data and sharing data to the public. So if you have requests, questions, please email us at open.data@cookcountyil.gov. We are also updating our portal to make sure this address is on every single data set that we publish, so that you can reach out to us if you have questions or requests, and we can take it from there. And then these are just reference materials, and I'm sure we'll make this deck available to you in terms of the different initiatives and links to applications. So thank you. I guess now it's time for questions. Sure.
My name is Elizabeth Scott. I work at the Chicago Rehab Network. I'm a policy analyst.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all these plans about modernizing systems, moving towards open data infrastructure, what kinds of conversations are going on about standardization? Because if you publish it this way, and the city publishes it this way, and the state of Illinois publishes it this way, that ends up being a lot of work for me, because it's not like I can't, take the dashes out between the PIN numbers with a formula. I can, but if it's all the same, it's going to work a lot better. If all the maps are projected the same, we can just agree this is how we're going to format this information, it would be tremendously helpful. And for the state of Illinois is even worse. I was discussing over lunch that Department of Revenue still uses a coding system that was retired by the Census Bureau in 1997 because they don't care. It doesn't matter for them. But for me, as an analyst, I get tax information from them, and then I have to crosswalk it to something more contemporary, to the NAICS system, to kind of do some analysis that merges census products and state of Illinois products. So I just use that as a way to illustrate, if we plan in advance for integration, there can be a lot of efficiencies. So what's happening there?
So I feel your pain. As the director of applications, we receive data from many municipalities, and I'm not saying it's the state, but it comes in all forms and fashions. We've had to write extra code to handle and manage or scrub data before we import it. So I feel your pain. Honestly, I think that for us at least, this is it's more than just getting off the ground. We're maturing, but I think a part of that we definitely need to communicate with our other partners, and that's the city as well as the state. And I think discussions will be happening in the near future to start the dialogue about standards and policies in general. Right now, I think at least for the Cook County, we sort of operate on our own. And I don't think that we publish data in the format in the ways that you kind of mentioned, but we're definitely willing to sit down and have discussions with these other folks, and we will. And we'll also have Josh and Dan help us in setting some of that up. So I can't commit to a date, but certainly with Simona's leadership and our relationship with Smart Chicago, I think that's something that we can definitely do. You?
So on the data standards conversation is becoming more prevalent recently, and certain data standards are coming around as around certain topics. So there's been proposed standards around food inspections data, which is pretty prevalent across all cities. There's been proposed standards around building inspections data. Larger scale standardization has also been discussed. But one of the biggest problems that we're facing is, depending which city you're in, the processes are different. Your data reflect your processes. So for instance, take building standards data is going to look very different in San Francisco because of the problems that they face, earthquakes and other natural disasters, versus what you're going to have in Chicago, where tornadoes is pretty much the big concern until the Madrid fault takes a swing. So there's been discussions, but it's been hard to figure out how those things match. Now, in the Chicago or the state of Illinois example, it's a bit extreme because it sounds like they're using SIC codes as opposed to the NAICS codes, and so you have to rely on National Crosswalks Center's crosswalk between the two. So that's a little bit different. That's just but I should say this. In their defense, or proxy defense, because I'm not sure what the circumstances are, this is sometimes the burden of publishing raw information that is kept. So if your source system is keeping track of a deprecated code, an old way to keep track of things, and you're publishing what you have, then that's what you've done. And if you take the extra steps to do those conversions, it might help the end user, but also it adds to the burden of an open data program. It's another step. So do you try to standardize that, or do you try to work on the next data set? And sometimes that's what you face. Do I make this look pretty, or do I move on to the next thing? So sometimes it's quality over quantity, and that is, at points, decisions you have to make. And I have to say, in most cases, especially with my team, I tend to favor more on the quantity side at this point still, because we're not there yet. So standards are being discussed a lot. There's trying to get those things to merge, and it's probably going to be the next big conversation over the next 5 years. I was just talking to a board member from W3C yesterday, and we're talking about some next iterations of data standards that we could introduce across open data portals.
I was wondering, if all this data gets merged at some point in the future, the idea, my understanding is that it's going to help stop the overlap of services and help the budgets be more streamlined between what the city does, what the county does. Is that the ultimate goal, to get the funding sources? You know, the services are all, there's a lot of services. Where they come from, I live in the city, sometimes I don't know who's doing what where. And so, just wondering if that's the bigger picture, or if that's just a fantasy.
I mean, it's about my pay grade way above. I mean,
But
obviously-
I mean, that's what the Tony Kirkwood has said. She wants to eliminate county services.
Transparency and accountability. Obviously, she's working on multiple initiatives, so the open data by itself is probably not one of those things that will lead us to this ultimate goal, because.
But I think it could help
Yeah.
that initiative.
Absolutely. I mean, the data obviously is valuable because it helps us for decision making.
Correct.
The direct link is there, so absolutely.
There's and then one in the back too.
Yeah.
I
Please.
was actually curious if you could talk a little bit about, in the county, what services do you provide as the IT for the county, for the state's attorney, or for these other elected officials? I know that sometimes you're providing the background administrative work, and sometimes they have their own, like, who owns the information? There's lots of questions there.
Yeah, so typically, independently elected officials have their own IT staffs, so they handle a lot of the, blocking and tackling, help desk stuff, server administration, if we're not hosting them. So typically they have their own IT staff that sort of manage their domain of services that they offer to internally to their users, and typically they even manage their own websites. The Bureau of Technology falls under President Preckwink's administration, so all the offices that fall under President Preckwick, we serve as pretty much the single point of IT. So that could be help desk, that could be network server, as well as app development. So we sort of handle the gamut, and we also partner with a couple of the elected officials, and maybe we do on behalf of the greater group, we do a lot of app dev. So a perfect example would be property. Although each elected official that I mentioned earlier has their own IT staff, well, it all writes to the mainframe. So the mainframe developers are on my staff, and we all actually share jobs, we share the actual platform, and handle that for them on their behalf. So in a nutshell, like I said, under the Office of the President, BOT, Bureau of Technology, is actually the help desk, and we work, not the help desk, the IT staff, and we work hand in hand with them on pretty much everything IT related.
Matt?
So first off, thank you both. This is a really one of the questions I've had in when you guys do this and reading today is that it sounds like one of the main barriers to big data has been that you are having to deal with all these legacy systems, dealing with the fact that a lot of the technology in place is outmoded. But at one point in time, that was cutting edge, right? That was the state of the art. And so I'm curious, looking forward, 10, 15 years, when the next big data revolution is going to happen, and the next thing that is after the space of open data. How do you, as a county, as a city, think about and try to work for data resiliency within your organization, and maybe build something that's good for Lingo, so that when folks that have your job in 10 years or 15 years won't necessarily have to run into the same problem of the system.
Take a crack at that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking a long ways away, right? Technologies that won't exist, architectures and protocols that won't exist. Right now, our strategy is not to be too locked into a particular direction, to be able to pivot to whatever is going to come next. But quite honestly, that's so far down the road, and the challenges that we face today don't spend a lot of time looking that far down the road. Just simply trying to get into the sectors, into the areas that we need to be in. In my case, analytics and some of these other focus areas where we want to do work in. So that's far enough down the road where it gets a bit more complicated to even try to answer questions like that.
And what I follow up and say is, at least now we have the advantage of designing and architecting systems with open data in mind. So it does give us the ability to be a little bit more nimble, versus many years ago. Mainframe systems, are built to store a lot of data, to do a lot of processing, and to really be there. You rarely have issues. They're online, they're ready to go, but obviously a little bit more cumbersome when you want to data mine. So at least we have that advantage now as we're planning. And one of the reasons that 3 years ago when I took the job here is because everything wasn't perfect. So it's a great challenge. There are a lot of opportunities for improvement. So I'm actually a part of the teams that are actually looking at solutions and better ways to do things. And it's really rewarding because things that we do impact the actual public. So all that to say, I agree 100% with the statements before me, but all that to say that as we, honestly, I'll give you a perfect example. When we draft RFPs now, we actually look at key factors or make key goals that we can achieve. And we also think about how we can actually provide open data, with this system when we go live. What type of automation can we implement? That wasn't being done, 5 years ago. That wasn't being done 10 years ago. So I think that's a shift. And, in terms of our culture, it's being incorporated, and it just takes time to keep maturing. Yes, please.
So, if you're working with the assessor's office, so that would be like one of these other elected officials that you're sort of having that relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
They recently added a feature where you can get their data through this subscription service. And if you're doing it too, so our small nonprofit can't really afford the subscription service, and if you're going to put it on the open data portal, But doesn't that sort of put his subscription fee revenue sort of to, or is his data better or more timely, or how do we know like what avenue should I be seeking the money for the subscription, or should I be waiting for you and your team?
So your question on the assessor's data and what they're publishing and selling versus open data and sort of what the county is separately publishing. It's interesting. I actually worked at the assessor's office for 15 years, and I was a part of the team that actually started the initiative. Now, I didn't necessarily make the policy, but I was part of the IT team to help implement it. And they actually take a lot of data that many of you may not have interest in. Maybe you do, but they're trying to make data more readily available for appraisers, for people that do certain work. And there's an argument there, whether it should be open or not, whether it's FOIAble or not. So that's above my pay grade. But it's not as, in terms of the data we put out, it's a little less detailed in terms of, the assessor has very detailed records that they manage, that they control, in systems that we don't all have access to. So that's the stuff that's the data that they're putting out, and actually in terms of their subscription service on a regular basis, it's being updated, and it spans from everything related to a parcel to exemptions to certificate of error history. I mean, just everything that they actually manage and update. So there's sort of a little dotted line there. The Bureau of Technology, we actually, we own the sort of the house where the data lives, but the assessor actually and other agencies actually update that data, and there's an argument that they sort of own it, if you will. And I do know that they've been FOIA'd a number of times, and the FOIAs have been rejected, and they've been allowed to continue with selling this particular data set versus being able to make it available to the public. So that particular data set, the Bureau of Technology, Cook County is not making available because they're actually selling it, or they're selling access to the data, I think is how it goes.
Okay, we're going to switch over onto the city side here real quick. So we saw the county data portal. So who's sorry, let me switch to mirror this. Who has seen who's seen the county data portal? Okay, so a handful, and same people or same group. How many people have seen the city data portal? Okay, so a little bit more, but generally the same. So the city data portal, data.cityofchicago.org, right? The intention behind this was originally around transparency. When Mayor Emanuel signed, when Mayor Emanuel had his transition plan, he spoke about the open data portal in the regards of both business development and then also about transparency. It was both the same side of the coin. To be able to spark economic development within the city, we need to be looking at our own house, how we're doing things internally, and make that readily available. And I think this is true across all open data movements across the United States. It was originally around performance metrics. And now we're getting to a separate question, which is how can we use the open data portal to help the local nonprofits, local businesses, and citizens and residents of Chicago on a day-to-day basis, beyond and a bit more than just performance metrics. And I don't mean that to diminish or admonish performance metrics as a thing, but to try to step that next bit. So to get a survey, so I can speak to how many people here from nonprofits? How many people here from businesses? News organizations. News organizations. One more? Yeah, all right. I can always walk into a room and know where the reporters are at. Government organizations. Academia. Okay, so many nonprofits, some governments, just a couple of businesses, 1.5 news organizations, and just a little bit of governments. Most of the government people are up here or somewhere else. So just a brief overview of this. So one of the big data sets a lot of people reference is something that's over 5 million rows. And it's every single crime in Chicago from 2001 to last week. Now with our data portal, we automatically update most things. We have a series of scripts that run in the background. Sometimes these things run every 5 minutes. Sometimes these things, most of the time, run once a day. And this is one that runs once a day. Every day, at 5 a.m., it says, give me all the recent crimes minus 1 week. And that's because crimes change a lot in the first week as you try to figure out and classify what the crime is as the investigation's going on. So this is a rich data set that shows when, where, what type of crime was committed at a particular location. So as you see up here right on top, at 11:59 p.m., just before the cutoff, 1 week ago, there was a public peace violation. And then there's a latitude and longitude all the way over here onto the right. Latitude, longitude. That's key, latitude and longitude. There's always a where to everything that happens in the city. It's mostly where it happened and what happened as opposed to a who. Obviously there's no privately identifiable information on here because that's not the key. So as we take a look at that, and this has been used for a lot of different reasons, for academic purposes, certainly to understand where your community is at. And the Chicago Tribune has used it for their Crime in Chicagoland Explorer. I meant to pull this up. But this is how it is. So government sucks at interfaces. You should see it. We wear primary colors. Walking into our offices is like looking at a Keith Haring piece of art. It's just blotchy and terrible. We suck at interfaces. But when we make the data available, we make it available through a public API. And that's what's sitting behind here is this public machine readable. This is the key word that everybody in open data policy really thinks about. Machine readable, focus on. You have this public API which feeds in this data. And here you have this crime in Chicagoland. So what I just showed you was a spreadsheet. All right? I showed you a spreadsheet. I showed you data. And now what you have in front of you is information of what's happening in the Loop neighborhood. This is a Loop, right? It looks like it. No.
Hyde Park.
No, yeah, sorry. So this is what's happening down here in Hyde Park. So you've changed it into information, not just simply data that you're looking at, to transform it into something navigable. And this can be used for whatever purpose you have. I see nonprofits use this information, understand what is in their neighborhood if they're a community activist organization or whatever it might be. But it can be also used for more research purposes or however many purposes. Another topic that's often talked about is energy consumption, energy usage, certainly within the notion of sustainability. So we're the first city government to publish energy consumption data by census block, by month, by the energy type, by the building type, right? This is actually the aggregation of average electricity usage per square foot by neighborhood. We see the Loop uses the most, largely because likely these buildings. But when you dive into that data, you can see so much. This is a rich data source that I have not seen utilized yet. People have done a little bit of work with it, but it's something that's still, for the most part, untouched and really unanalyzed. This is one of my favorite data sets. Beach quality data. So there's water sensors in every single one of Chicago's beaches. There's water sensors in every single one of Chicago's beaches. We tap into that to pull information about the water quality at every one of Chicago's beaches. What you have behind here, so many of these sensors are now going offline because we're getting into the fall and winter season, and so Parks Department starts disabling them so they don't become damaged. But one of my favorite data sets, and you have it, takes a second to pull up, and hopefully it pulls up for this little segment, is the historical water temperature by hour for every single beach. And it's supposed to graph out. Let me do this one more time. It might not display. It's a bit heavy. But over time, it starts a Memorial Day weekend and moves forward from there. So we had a couple of beaches. This is listed out in Celsius. Again, this is a bit heavy, and sometimes computers can't quite handle it. But you get to see that, and you can train that. I'm excited for 10 years from now, when somebody who's in a company, in a nonprofit, can take a look at this and perhaps see changes in water temperatures that over a 10-year period, right? So if we're at 50, 60 degrees, typically, or maybe 70 degrees, and hopefully 80-degree days, right, where the water temperature is nice, what is it going to look like 10 years from now? This is micro data that you can take a look at changes and patterns, as opposed to larger national data sets you often rely upon. This is community data. This is data that's happening right in front of you. More practically, there's other elements to take a look at, such as where all the primary public health centers are at throughout the city of Chicago. What's their phone number? What's their address? And one thing that we have done a very good job standardizing on is addresses and where things are at. As other elements come into play, there needs to be more work about standardizing that so it's easier to farm, easier to take in, and easier to use. And this data, as I mentioned before, can be used in a number of different ways by a number of different organizations. I think the large lots example is key. Large lots helping promote large lots. Data Made, a local company doing design and consultant work using open data on behalf of LISC, a nonprofit in Chicago, to help the city and county achieve one of its major policy directives, right? To help turn around abandoned and vacant buildings throughout the city of Chicago, and vacant lots, sorry, in particular, and transform those into tax-paying institutions. The federal government has income tax. The state has sales tax and income tax we rely upon. Our economic driver, the money that really brings money into the city government, is property tax, of course, and same for the county as well. So these things are very important for the survivability of the city. And allowing people to have a better user interface. This is a better user interface to property. In an indirect way, this is a better user interface to obtain property. This is key. If this was kludgy, if it was a difficult process, if you had to triplicate and mail it in, we wouldn't have that many bidders. We wouldn't have that many people coming in and taking advantage of this program. But if you make this easy, you make this navigable, then it becomes possible. Another program that is quite pragmatic was wasmycartoad.com. Who's had their car towed? Thank you for your donation to the city of Chicago. We appreciate it. All right, so wasmycartoad, you walk out, your car is gone. What has happened to your car? Wasmycartoad.com, a very literal internet address. And you can type in your license plate number. What's beneath this? This is a very simple application. What's beneath this is public data. It's reading off one of the data sources that we have on the Open Data Portal. The guy who designed this was one of the early programmers for Songza. Songza just got bought out for how many $1 million from Google? $30 million by Google. This is a very good programmer who took his weekend, took his time to say, you know what, I want to do something that impacts everybody else. And that's ultimately what the data portal has become. The data portal isn't the tech community, isn't representative of all the civic development community. It doesn't represent everybody who's here, not by any means. But what it has been within the data community, it has become a pretty good town square. It's a place where you can gather around and talk about. It's data that's available that impacts all of us. So there's something common for us to talk about with this data. And it allows people to sit on it. It allows people to appreciate it, right, as a town square. But what it is it helps get the conversation started. That's ultimately probably what the best thing that open data portals can do for the local community. And this is whether or not it's City of Chicago, Illinois, Cook County, or if it's San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, or wherever the other city is, or where other places are. But this is key, and it's amazing to see how this transformed. Before, it was about transparency, performance metrics, and showing what our business is. And now it's transformed into something different, more about development and trying to strive and do better. And for us to do a good job of that, we have to talk about standards, we have to talk about some of these technical things. We have to talk about how city and county data plays along well. Another great website, metrodatachicago.org, I hope, is the address. What's the address?
It might be like Metro Chicago data?
Metro Chicago data. This is a website which is an agglomeration of city, county, and state data. And you bring those things together. And Josh and I talk a lot about, well, you've released this data, you have this data out. How can we release complementary data on the city side? Because as the county has their purviews, the city has our purviews. How can we bring these things together so it can be used across the spectrum? And so we're very excited to see where it is. We can talk a lot more about how data portals like these can spark research, can spark advanced analytics, which I'm also responsible for the city, and how the data portal has been key in that asset. But one of the things that is certainly important for us is, what do you need? What do you need? What do you want to know because that helps us prioritize what to release first. As I said, we prefer quantity over quality. The quantity, there's plenty of, but we need to release what's important and what's valuable to everybody else. And so we're always interested in hearing what you have to say, and I've already talked for too long to prevent that from happening. I'm not sure where we're at on time altogether anyways, but that's all I had today for prepared remarks. All right.
Again?
Also, same question for the city. Like, how do you work with like the Parks District or CPS or other sister agencies that are at the city level but not necessarily under? What sort of collaboration are you doing there?
So when it comes to data, it's all carrots. Everybody says the world's carrots and sticks, right? And when it comes to data, it's all about the carrots. You know, how can you use your data to help you? And by that pronoun, I mean the departments themselves, right? So Parks wants people to know about the quality of their beaches at a given time. That's important to them. They communicate that through other different means. They have Twitter account. They have these different things. But what is being provided here is machine readable. The promise that somebody else might come along and make a great application is always one of those carrots. The other bit of it is it makes it accessible to everybody. So at the very least, they can point back to the open data portal and say, hey, here's information that you want other people to know. And governments are not that hesitant to release information. We often do in PDFs and other terrible different ways. This is just simply a way to supplant that. That's more flexible, that offers more.
I'd like to get to another element of discussion. It's a very, very good thing to develop data sets and to put them up on data portals and make them available to the public. And that serves the interest of e-government and government transparency. But the next dimension, it seems to me, is to aid decision making. And I'll just give you a case in point. Google has just put out on GitHub a new package called the Causal Impact Package. I've been kind of looking at this. And there's actually code up there on GitHub for installation. And what it is, it takes a Bayesian approach and in a very simple way, it allows you to remove one variable to see what would happen if it was not there. So it's a way of testing out the effectiveness of, let's say, a particular policy. So let's say taking advantage of a TIF district. You might be able to use this to factor out the TIF district and see whether or not the economy in that particular area would have developed in the same way without it. You know, that's a way of kind of guiding decision making. It's a sort of a dynamic focus that goes beyond putting up data sets and making them available. What about this whole issue of predictive analytics, using these dynamic packages to guide policy or check policy or things like that?
Yeah, got it. So let me fully explain. So for me, I'm the Chief Data Officer and Director of Analytics for the City of Chicago. My purview is I think about data all day long. From the moment that it is conceptualized as digital data in a database. So from the moment that a 911 call comes in, it's sitting in a database, I'm responsible for it. So I'm responsible for the fundamental databases. Also for open data when we publish anything. Also for business intelligence, which allows people to write reports and things like that. But what's interesting, what we've done recently in the City of Chicago for my duration I've been here, for a couple years now, is the Advanced Analytics Unit, where we have PhDs and people with graduate degrees. I'm myself an economist. I'm a researcher. And what we do is we apply advanced research, not just summaries, not just statistics. So actually, just the other day, I sent a couple of my researchers the note about the Google causal package, bootstrapping to try to figure out where something happens. And so we're actively involved in that. We predict where rats are. We actually have 2 units, 2 trucks, 4 people in Chicago that drive around to places that we recommend on a website that's automatically generated every single day. We actually are running a few experiments throughout the city right now where we've developed predictive algorithms, and now we're actually running experiments in the city to see whether or not those predictive algorithms work. to use statistics on our own statistics. We could have called it a day and said, hey, we did something cool, but we actually want to see if these work, so we run experiments throughout the city, not unlike Google does with their interface, and see how people change. So that is a primary function. I alluded to it. I just obliquely mentioned that I haven't talked about how the data portal encourages research. We can work with universities, we can work with private companies, and we have worked with private companies to work on advanced research questions. And one of the ways that we can do it, the biggest pain in the ass with data, and if you went to the MOU and data sharing thing earlier today, the biggest pain is sharing data. If I get some onto the data portal, it's fair game for anybody. No MOUs, no nothing else. It's there. And when I go work with someone, it's like, great, we have that on the data portal, work with it. You talk about decision making and how releasing data help decision making. We just released this last week. All the red light camera violations by camera throughout the city of Chicago by day. We've also done the same thing with speed cameras, which hasn't been part of the news stories yet. Right? So this information is out there. Other people can now leverage this information. All right. Even if I'm not looking at it right now, somebody else can look at it right now to spot out anomalies. So I agree. Advanced analytics and data is key to any organization. If we treat it like a value, if we think it's valuable, we should treat it strategically and use it in all its different forms. All right. Everybody's quiet.
If you guys had a wish list of other data that you wish people were using or that you could put out there, what would it be?
Yeah, we got hamstrung by the census. So the census is peeled back. And it's not the census's fault. It was legislated that there's no more long-form census. There's no more how many bathtubs you have. Right? If you got the census form, you got the 5 questions in 2010. Right, that has a tremendous negative impact on what we do, and I imagine for any nonprofit that's sitting here, I mean, go and try to take a look of what's the education level by gender, by occupation throughout the city, by neighborhood throughout the city of Chicago. Right, you have to rely on a 5-year estimate. They send surveys every year, and they have to aggregate across 5 years to get that number. What's 5 years? 5 years is. 5 years ago, there was a recession. We were in mid-recession 5 years ago. So what does that data mean to us anymore? So I just want my old census back.
For us, I think it's a little bit more simpler. I know that on our portal, I don't believe we have much information from the justice side, the criminal side. I like to see more from them, as well as the hospitals. We service a lot of people in Cook County and from other counties, and I really like to see more data from there. Nothing necessarily specific, but I love to work with them, and Josh, our friends, to help get more data out there on those fronts, as well as eventually things like the tax bill, turning that from paper and actually publishing all data on it for the mass public. I mean, those are things that I see as valuable, and honestly, we could really use your help in making recommendations of what you'd like to see, so that we can take a look at it internally and see if it's something that we can provide.
What do you guys want to see? Right, we're the ones publishing the data. What is it that you need? I mentioned census. I can't help that, but that's one of the big questions when it comes to open data. That's the question.
Oh, please.
I've been looking for and have been having a lot of trouble finding the aldermanic menu, so their budget, the $1.3 million budgets that aldermen get in Chicago for each year. How is that spent, and where is this all recorded, and why am I having so much trouble finding it right now?
Certainly. Okay. Yeah, that's not on the portal right now. That's good.
It's in PDF documents. I've been there, done that.
I'm going to talk to you.
Okay.
PDF documents.
So you start working when it's in the database. What happens when there's something new that happens in the city and they need a new database to help them track their information? Like, who helps those departments get that up in place?
Well, certainly people like Derek on the county side. I mean, that's if it wasn't for applications, we would have never started collecting data anyway. I mean, the difference now is databases were just for the applications,
Right.
and it was just the main stored data for the applications that being used. Now we're starting to realize that we got 10 years of behavior and
Yeah.
requests, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work hand in hand with our users, and like I said before, we think about things like open data as we're designing, and we're creating structures, and we look at, at a high level strategically, we know that our enterprise service bus, once we implement it, that's going to allow us to reuse a lot of code that's going to be put in place to share information very easily, very reusable, to connect it to our portal. We consider it. We take these things. We keep these things in mind as we design applications, and on every single enterprise application that we're looking at now, in our minds, we're considering open data and what can we share, how can we share it, and most importantly, to keep it frequent, keep it current, I should say, daily. That's something that's kind of been challenging for the county due to our legacy systems.
But it's not unlike any private business. I mean, the requirements come from the business owners and the subject matter experts, that are running the business, and then obviously we weigh whether it's a build versus buy decision, and whether we go to procure it competitively or we can work with something in-house. By and large, we can probably work, competitively and work with our vendor partners to help us get there.
Yep.
So,
I want to know, with like the 911 data and the crime data, does that get translated back to the police department and to the, do they get this report and some report so that they know where to put police and where?
Yeah, it's been pretty well documented in the press that one of the big things that Superintendent McCarthy has done is implement CompStat, which is a particular set of reports, in many ways, performance management system. Now, I'm not deeply familiar with it. Went to a meeting once on it, but it's a way to understand, where behaviors are, where the spikes are, what are the patterns, what are the trends. Actually, it's very, very notable with this data set. We don't follow CompStat protocol exactly, so there's some misalignment there, but that's been a debate for some time. So certainly there has been a lot of data that's being used, in particular, even to the point of a methodology of what kind of reports we look at and what sort of comparisons that they take a look at.
Because to me, the data is only helpful. Make it work, in a community, so that you can not necessarily prevent the problems, but at least be more proactive to solve those problems.
Yeah, certainly, and they certainly do look at that. But always the question is, with crime is probably one of the most tough social sciences problems to address, and just by you don't necessarily know what's going to happen by just putting more police there. It just might just move to different districts there.
Derek, I think you talked about health data a little bit, but could you elaborate a little bit more on the availability of health data at the county level?
Josh, help me out. I don't recall what was posted.
There's on the portal right now. There's a couple. It's a couple years old of admissions to county hospitals by, I believe, zip code. So that would be something that maybe would get updated. I think that's for the most part it on the portal right now. And I think like Cook County Health Systems and the hospital may keep some data on their own sites too, though probably in PDF right now. But those are the areas.
So part of my charge from Simona is to reach out to organizations like Health. Right now it's separate, so we don't control their data. Obviously, there are a lot of different reasons why, but in terms of regulations, things of that nature. But we need to work out it's just an understanding so that we can get more data from them and make it readily available on the portal. So that's one thing that's on our list of things to do that we'll be reaching out to them soon. That's why I mentioned it. Yes.
Tom, I understand you like that there's on the data analytics. You say there's a public API for anything published on the city's portal?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pull that up and point out where it is. I'm always pretty bad about doing that. So go to the export button there. And so I did not mention this at all, in fact. So you go to export and you can download it as CSV, JSON, PDF for whatever reason, and Excel formats, of course. But you can also go to SOTA API. And API means application, Jesus Christ, application programs interface, where it's a URL that you point to. copy and paste it into there. Which, anytime you visit this URL, you'll get that information most up to date as you would have saw it in kind of its spreadsheet form. You don't have to download it. You don't have to open it up in Excel. You can just simply go from the program that you've created to it. So, wasmycarto.com. It's pinging against a URL just like this. And when you type in a license plate, it pings against it, sees if something is there, and returns back the answer.
And that's going to be the same exact setup for the county site and the state site.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Export SOTA API.
As far as the less detailed assessor's office data that you may be able to release, what kind of indicators are in that group?
Indicators, could you?
I mean, so is it just the age of the building, the building type, the last tax year?
Sure. So we consider some of those things characteristics of the parcel. So I do know that all the property groups came together and they released a website jointly to put out information. So we've been working with the treasurer and the board of review and others to get permission and to partner with them so that we can take some of that data, if not all of it, and publish it. So you're going to get your building, or it could be a parcel, but it also could be an improved lot. So your building, the age of the building, characteristics, brick versus frame, things of that nature, square footage. You're going to get the assessed value. You're going to get all values related to the assessor as well as the board. These are things we're hoping for. It's already published. It's just more of a search engine. We're looking to obviously publish the entire data set. But there may be exemption data as well. Again, we're still working with these agencies to get the approval so that we can publish it because they sort of control the data. Please, the email address we have, submit your request. It helps. It helps us. And if you're looking for specific things, list them. And we're all for it. I mean, just from in terms of our philosophy, I like to publish it all. But internally in Cook County, it's a little red tape we have to work through, and we will. Please.
I just following up on that. When's the best time to talk to you guys specifically as opposed to using like the FOIA process?
Good question. FOIA, you definitely get results in a certain time period. Let's start with an email. And, we publish these open.data at cookcountyil.gov. And then, we'll tell you. I'm a part of the process in reviewing the responses. And if I need to escalate, I will. But if we have access to it and we know we publish it already, lots of times it's not a problem to just simply publish it. However, if there's some resistance internally, and it may not be the Bureau of Technology, it may be agencies that we work with because we sort of house the property data at least on the mainframe. So we may have access to actually dig in and get data, but we don't maintain it. So if there's some resistance there, then we'll let you know, and then maybe we have to go a different route. But we've, perfect example, we've been working with the Treasurer's Office for a couple months on a lot of data. There are challenges. You guys don't just face them, but internally, behind the scenes, we face them as well. So we're working through them, and again, we're going to publish a lot more data from property sector. Once we get a number of approvals.
For us, same thing. Sometimes people do it best, have some sense that there's a database that's driving that data. It's like, hey, you know what? If there's a database, you can just automate this. And for us, automation is key. If we have to manually do things, we'll likely get out of sync. But to a certain extent, they're almost the same process in the sense that when you FOIA something, it ends up in the FOIA log, which is published on the Open Data Portal. And behind the scenes, we do text mining to try to pick out words that are appearing in FOIA logs. That helps us prioritize which FOIA that we might want to pursue. So somewhat of the same side of the coin to a certain extent.
If someone FOIAs something and someone else has this exact same request, do both people have to go through that process? Is there somewhere where people are sharing what they FOIA'd so that other people don't have to?
So, I don't know, Chris, I'm not sure if you want to go into that more.
So there's nowhere that people are just posting their requests. I was actually going to ask you guys if there's ever going to be a time where you guys just post the return FOIA request online.
No.
But there is a website called FOIA Machine. It's a nonprofit run website where people post their FOIA requests and their responses. And it's not a requirement, it's just something people do to track their own requests, but it has a lot of cool stuff on it.
And Document Cloud, I think, is being used for a similar purpose, as, especially with documents that, well, just published documents. So sometimes no, because sometimes we allow FOIA requests to go out because we don't have the same concerns. There's been a number of data sets that were released via FOIA, but we won't release on the portal because to make it completely publicly available is a little nervous. Just because it's towing a line where it can be FOIA, it should be released as a FOIA, but to have carte blanche access to it could be a little makes us a little nervous. And usually these are because related to PII issues or potential PII issues.
All right. Well,
All right.
time has come, right?
Okay.
I guess so.
All right. Well, thank you to Simona, Derek, and Tom. Next, I believe we're upstairs. Yeah, we're all going upstairs to the town hall thingy, and then party.
I was thinking outside.